2, 1.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is 4 o'clock. Now is the time set for the regular board meeting of the Arizona State Schools for the Deaf and the Blind. We're going to start with 1.01 call to order, meeting call to order. Suke, can you take the roll call?
Certainly. President David Nigro.
Present.
Brittany Buchanan.
Present.
Linda Bove. Present. Lynn Davison.
Present.
Mike Gordon.
Present.
Dean Howard.
Present.
P.V. Jantz.
Present.
Aaron Wonders.
Present.
And Suke Kneifel present.
Thank you. We can move on to 1.02, call to the public on agendized items. We have the summaries of the emails. Suke?
Yes, we just have one call to the public comment from Elizabeth Brous in regards to having a mechanism in place for formal complaints and grievances and to have some guarantee that they will be heard and discussed and in support of an ombudsman position.
Thank you, Suke. And again, as we did last time, all of the comments in their entirety are posted on the website and will be on the website for several weeks for the public to review. Next up, 1.03 information item, Superintendent's report. Superintendent Reichman.
Good afternoon, President Nigro, members of the ASDB Board of Directors, Assistant Superintendent Rex, Assistant Superintendent Cooper, and the ASDB community. Welcome to our May 5th, 2022 board meeting. It also happens to be Cinco de Mayo, right? So perhaps some of you plan to have some margaritas after the board meeting. This afternoon, I want to remind the board members of the ASDB mission. Our mission says that we are committed to excellence and innovation in education of our students, in providing leadership services, and in collaboration with parents, school districts, and the community, and also with our partner state agencies. As we consider our mission, how do we want to go about fulfilling that mission and providing the best education and the best support possible to our students? The obvious answer is we must have highly qualified professional staff. We must be able to recruit and attract and retain highly qualified professional staff. How do we recruit and retain highly qualified professional staff? We have to have good systems in place that provide the adequate support to those professional staff members and systems that support a positive culture within the agency. So how do we create those good systems? How do we support a positive culture? We have to have highly qualified and competent leaders here within the agency. We have to be able to attract and retain highly qualified leaders so that they are able to focus on our systems. And then they can problem solve and innovate and improve our systems. with systems improving, then we can provide better support to our professional staff. And as a result, our professional staff can provide better educational support to all of our deaf, hard of hearing, blind, visually impaired, and deaf-blind students. How do we attract and retain those highly qualified leaders? We, and my job, is to support them. My job is to make their work environment as safe as possible. My job is to empower them. And obviously, I make agency level decisions, but a lot of those daily programmatic decisions are up to those leaders to make. Systems change and system improvements happen because of their leadership. I can't do it alone. We have to have a team of highly qualified and dedicated and passionate leaders. We need that within our agency. Your job as the board of directors includes 4 components. Establish policy that gives us rules and regulations to follow. Set the direction for the agency, and we are doing that with a strategic plan. Be an ambassador for the agency. Let everyone know about the work that we are doing. And finally, support our leaders. Without your support, our leaders are not able to problem solve. They are not going to be able to create that systemic change that we need in order to provide the best possible education and supports for our students. That said, I want to mention 2 leaders who are leaving the agency. First, I want to talk about Principal Creasy. As you are aware, Principal Creasy has been with us at ASDB for a total of 7 years. She started 1 year before I did. She was the new principal of the Arizona School for the Blind on the Tucson campus. At the end of her 2nd year, we asked her to take on, in an interim position, the principal of the Arizona School for the Deaf, because the principal of the Arizona School for the Deaf had a contract that was not renewed. Principal Creasy agreed to take on that additional school. So she took responsibility for the entirety of Tucson campus. The following year, we did an extensive search for a new principal for the deaf school, but we were not able to find a qualified candidate. At that time, I asked Principal Creasy to become the permanent principal for both schools on the Tucson campus. Since that time, Principal Creasy has done everything that we have asked of her. She has provided good, strong leadership on the Tucson campus. And so I just wanted to say thank you, Principal Creasy, for all of your work, for your dedication to the Tucson campus over these past 7 years. I will miss you. The second person I want to mention is Assistant Superintendent Dr. Kristen Rex. Dr. Rex will also be leaving the agency. She started 4 months before I did. She, as a new assistant superintendent, had myself as a new superintendent, and we had a lot of learning to do, right, Kristen? We didn't know much, to be honest. We became partners, collaborators, we learned together. Those first 3 years were really that learning curve of learning what we didn't know. And after that initial 3 years, we understood the things that we didn't know, and we were able to start addressing all of those gaps in the system or those systemic challenges that we were facing at ASDB. So I have worked with Assistant Superintendent Rex for almost 6 years. And with her leaving, I feel like I'm going through a divorce, honestly. I am going to miss her. I am going to miss her support, her energy, her creativity, her can-do attitude. We will figure this out, and her heart and her passion. So thank you, Dr. Rex. I will miss you so much. Speaking of the future, we have already posted both positions, and we are actively recruiting. We are getting applicants already, and we are moving along fairly quickly. I will let Assistant Superintendent Rex talk about the principal position, and I will talk about the Assistant Superintendent position. That position is currently open, and we are recruiting. We are getting applicants. The posting will close on May 22nd. We will be screening that week and selecting candidates to interview. The following week, on May 31st to June 3rd, we will be conducting interviews. I'm hoping by the first or second week of June, we will be able to make an offer to a selected candidate. The reason that we are moving so quickly is because with the new school year starting that second or third week of July, we have absolutely no time to waste. We must have a new assistant superintendent selected, particularly assistant superintendent of instruction. So I am moving very quickly. If you happen to know of any qualified candidates for that position, please reach out to them. Please network for us and recruit for us. To let you know, I just found out today that news is out nationwide. There is someone from CEASD contacting me to ask if there are actually 2 vacant positions, and I responded that indeed there were. So any help that you can offer within your network to assist in recruiting would be very appreciated. And that concludes my report. This is Linda Bove. Can we talk about that later, about those 2 potential candidates that I am aware of? Is that okay? Can we have a private conversation later about that? And this is Dr. Annette. Yes, we can talk about that later. Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions for Superintendent Reichman on her report?
This is PV. This is PV Jans. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I want to make sure that as board members, we recognize Principal Creasy's work and her dedication to continuing to assist on Tucson campus and running those programs. I can only imagine how much of a challenge that was for her to face with so many different aspects, particularly going through COVID. And I was disappointed to receive the news of her resignation. Please know that we do appreciate all of your effort and your contribution to the agency, and you are leaving big shoes to fill. As a board member, I am really bummed to lose you too. I think that losing you is significant to the agency. I understand the principal has already accepted another job, but my understanding is that you have not. Is that correct? So there's still time to change your mind? That being said, please know you have my support. I would like to see you stay. However, whatever decision you make, same as I said with Principal Creasy, I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors, and I sincerely hope to see our paths cross again sooner than later.
Thank you. Any other comments for Superintendent Reichman? No, Superintendent, there will be a board member involved in each of the job searches, is that correct?
Yes.
Has that board member been selected yet?
For the principal, yes. I can give that in my report, or do you want me to do that right
Okay.
now?
You can tell me now, that's fine.
Mr. Mike Gordon has offered to help with the principal search
Oh, okay,
down on the
great.
Tucson campus.
Okay, and the one for the assistant for your position?
Yes, this is Annette. I have asked Suke Kneifel and PV Jantz to be a part of that process.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any other questions for the superintendent?
This is Linda Bove. I do have a question. For principal search, can there be a deaf person involved in that search? Is that something to consider, having a deaf person on that panel, whether it be a board member or another member of staff involved in that process? So just putting that out there to keep in mind.
There is deaf representation. There's all sorts of representation, but there's deaf representation on the screening committee.
Good.
And also the interview committee. So both phases that the staff work through have great representation, I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Suke, and I may be jumping the gun. This might be more directed at Kristen than it is for Annette. Are you looking to fill a principal for each of the schools, or a principal and a vice principal to cover both of the schools?
At this point, I'm looking for a principal. Whether we need an assistant or a dean of students, I think that would be dependent on the candidate that is selected, to try to make sure that we have representation and support. But no, I haven't asked Shana for money for another position at this point in time.
Fair.
This is PV Jantz. And I would like to make one final remark. I have to say that after the last board meeting, we did receive a lot of emails with positive comments. A few of the community members and regarding several people, including Jay and Shana and some other staff members, wanting to make sure that we recognized Superintendent Reichman's comments. There were a lot of positive comments and support from the community, so I wanted to make sure that we as a board recognize that the positives significantly outweighed the negative comments that we received.
Okay, thank you. And if there are no other comments, we can move on to 1.04. Information item, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instructional Report, Dr. Rex.
Good afternoon, President Nigro and board members. You have received my report, but I would like to add the following information. From the birth to 5 area, ELP is celebrating. They have received the results from AZIP's annual 2020 audit, which documents ASDB's staff for providing services to families. Not only were they found in compliance, the entire staff received 100% compliance. And this data was measured during the pandemic, which was a lot of moving parts and factors. I don't know if we've ever had 100% compliance, but Kendra and I could not find it. So I'm going to say 100% compliance for the first time. This is significant because the team had been responding to a previous data breach. And basically, they developed a Google Drive to prevent future issues of personally identifiable information and ensure that the team was collecting data and keeping it in one place so they could all have access. Many thanks to Laura Hocknell and Manuela Giacomo's tenacity in this development, but also to the supervising teachers, Lisa Ring, Melissa Hole, Tracy Mossberger, and Laura for supporting their teams, ensuring the services that we provide families are compliant with IDEA Part C. I also want to give an update on the ASDB Tucson principal search. I sent out an email looking for interested people to participate in either the screening or potentially interviewing for a new principal. Over 16 staff members threw their name in the hat. Some were more interested in one or the other, but there was definitely interest, which I found very encouraging. So we went through and we tried to make sure that we had the best representation of all the different people that would benefit from having a principal. And we created a screening committee. I believe our closing date is on the 15th, Friday, and the screening committee will be meeting the 16th to receive all of the applicants and start the screening process. Soon as we have applicants to send to the interview committee, we will work on interviews the 25th through 27th. From those interviews, the committee will be asked to submit one or possibly two names for a second round of interviews. The second round of interviews goes direct to Annette Reichman and myself, and we ask additional questions that dig a little deeper into their experiences, the curriculum, their understanding of teaching our students, what our students' specific needs are when they're learning. And then hopefully our goal is to have a name to bring to you for the July board meeting. On a final note, I want to thank the board as well as Superintendent Reichman for allowing me the opportunity to serve the students of Arizona. Since 2016, I came to ASDB and I have learned how students access their learning, the types of equipment that our kids need to access learning, how important it is to ensure that access is available. But I think most importantly, what I take away from this are the people I met and the stories and the ways that our teachers have creatively created an environment for kids to grow. And all of the stories that I will probably take away with me, some of them are funny, some of them are sad, but most of them give me hope. And I'm very proud to say that I was a part of the restructuring and the support of bringing equity to the statewide programs, helping ELP as they start to transition and take on birth to 5, adding the preschool. And our two schools have worked so diligently and hard to have continuous improvement. And with the LEA status, they are developing ways to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to learn. And so I see that we have done some great things, and I have an expectation that they will continue because you have a lot of the right people in the right seats to do the job. We just have to give them what they need and then get out of their ways, remove those barriers. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rex. Are there any questions for Dr. Rex?
Mrs. Peavy Jans. And still, not too late to change your mind. Mrs. Linda Bove. I do have a quick question. Off the top of your head, How many applicants do you think you've received for the principal position? Just if you have a ballpark number.
I'm sorry, we have both internal applicants as well as external applicants. Around 5 that I reviewed so far. 5. There may be more.
Altogether 5?
Yeah, at this point in time, 5.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. X, were the Braille tests all finally received, or are they still a little bit late? They're all finished?
We're
Okay.
good.
I know the large print were delayed a couple of days, but not weeks.
That's good. Congratulations.
All right. Any other questions for Dr. Rex? No. Okay. We can move on to 1.05, information item, Assistant Superintendent of Agency Operations and Support Services, Ms. Cooper.
Good afternoon, Board President Nigro, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex, members of the board and the ASDB community. Each of the directors have provided to you their departmental reports. There is no additional information that has come forth since those reports were provided to you last week, other than we are gearing up for the year end, where we are having our teams provide operational and support service resources to the educational team, since the school year is actually fastly approaching to end. In addition to that, the team is also working on processes with the state's General Accounting Office to close the fiscal year, as well as responding to the sunset auditors, more specifically related to 3 areas that my group is more focused on. That would include the conflicts of interest, the master facilities plan, as well as helping look at the itinerant program fee-for-service structure. Additionally, we're also working on building the 2023 budget as the new fiscal year begins on July 1st, and the agency's budget submission package is due to the state's Office of Strategic Planning and Budget on or before September 1st. During the board work study session that was held on April 14th, we reviewed quite a bit of information. We reviewed and discussed the budget for personnel and operations. There was a tremendous amount of information that was shared during that session, which, believe it or not, lasted almost over 3 hours. That was just the beginning of doing a deep dive into the data, but I do hope that all of you feel as if you got a better understanding of the agency's resources, which again consists of our people, our technology, the facilities, and our finances. I did mention during the session that as board members, we do need your support and commitment as we continue to strategize and roll out changes to maximize our resources while at the same time meeting the agency's mission and our vision. I do look forward to possibly having more work study sessions with each of you where we're focusing on maybe one particular area and reviewing how we can realign, restructure, or identify opportunities to reallocate our resources. Again, that would be in alignment with Pillar 4 of our strategic plan, which is effective resource management. Last but not least, I also wanted to take the opportunity to give another update on the compensation structure analysis that the team and I have been working on. Since I know staff are very much so interested in what to possibly expect with the upcoming new school year and how this could impact their possible personal finances. I know I've mentioned on several occasions to ensure internal equity and external competitiveness, as well as to try to maintain and recruit and retain the staff members. We're looking at proposing at the July 7th board meeting a request to increase the hourly rates for our instructional assistants, our tech aid interveners. In addition to those position titles, we're also proposing to increase the hourly rates for staff that are grade 9 and below, as well as addressing the pay gap with the transportation staff. The team and I continue to look at all of the other areas and position classifications within the agency, but as I mentioned, this is our first year that we're taking on this more in-depth analysis and looking at all of the various pay schedules within the agency and trying to make sure that we have a consistent method on how we're identifying the compensation structure. As I've indicated before, though, our fiscal resources are limited. We don't have deep pockets, and so we're not going to be able to address all position classifications our first year. We do expect this to last probably another year or two before we're able to address all of the agency's position classifications in the agency. And so again, we're trying to make sure that we're prioritizing those and looking at how we can possibly impact those compensation changes in the near future. Other than that, that concludes my Assistant Superintendent report, and I'm open to answer any questions or comments that each of you may have.
This is Sue Kay. In regards to the deep dive on the salary classifications, are you working with ADOA at maybe looking at reclassing those positions into a higher grade levels?
Both, yes, we are. Yes, our HR office is working with ADOA. In addition to that, I didn't really talk about it. In addition to the compensation, we are looking at regrading positions as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Cooper? Okay, thank you, Ms. Cooper. We can move on to 2.01 action item. Approval of the consent agenda consistent with board policy to include items 3.02, 5.01, 6.01, 7.03, and 7.04. Would anyone like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Go ahead.
President, I have a quick question. Is it supposed to be 7.03 or 7.05?
Let's take a look here. Oh, there's an error there. You're right. Approval of minutes.
It should be 704 and 705.
Yeah, no, you're right. Thank you, Aaron. There's an error there. So let's see. You're right. 703 is a discussion item and possible action item. 705 is the consent agenda item. So let's do this then. I will move to, let's see, can we add items to the consent agenda? We can remove them.
I think it's just a typo here because it's correct here.
Oh, is it
It's
correct
noted
there?
on the agenda correctly.
Oh, okay, it's just in the board docs. Okay, well, if it's correct on that, then everyone's had proper notice of it, so we're okay. Thank you, Suki. So I will move that we adopt the consent agenda as noted in the agenda, 3.02, 5.01, 6.01, 7.04, and 7.05.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that carries. We can go to 3.01, information item, presentation on language and literacy development. Dr. Rex?
Thank you, President Nigro. I'm going to ask that Rose isn't here, Tina Schertzer and Tricia Waldale, if they can come down to the front row so I can, if there's any questions at the end, they would be the best to answer them. Current research on dual language and literacy development highlights the importance and multiple benefits of dual language literacy. The National Association of the Deaf Position Statement reads, ASL and the English bilingual education recognizes the intimate relationships between language development, cognitive development, and social-emotional development. As such, ASL and English bilingual education fosters positive self-esteem, confidence, resilience, and identity, factors necessary for lifelong learning and success. Rose Andriacola and Tina Schartzer, curriculum resource specialists, bring with them 60-plus years of classroom teaching experience, passion for accessibility, and student academic excellence to the table. Their primary goal is to support teachers with materials and training to provide balanced bilingual literacy instruction. Among their projects, one is the implementation of the bilingual grammar curriculum at the 2 school sites. As the assistant principal at PDSD, Tricia Waddell oversees the implementation of the BGC instruction. Tricia brings with her a wealth of knowledge and expertise regarding bilingual education and instruction. She and Tina are here to answer any questions. Rose and Tina created a short video to provide you a brief glimpse into the work they have been doing to support balanced dual language and literacy instruction that we will be sharing with you now.
Good evening, Superintendent Reichman, ASDB board members, and community. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to share our work with you. We will present a short summary of the projects we have been working on to supporting the development of ASL and English literacy for our deaf and hard of hearing students across the agency. We will briefly touch upon the agency's efforts in the following 3 areas. 1, our goals in direct support of ASDB's strategic plan. 2, creating accessible materials to support the National Geographic's Reach for Reading language arts curriculum, specifically video text and dual language instructional materials. And 3, the implementation of the bilingual grammar curriculum, ASL and English grammar lessons, and bedrock vocabulary. In the strategic plan, the second pillar states outstanding student success. The overarching goal is ensuring outstanding student development through early language acquisition and skill development, social and emotional learning, and high academic achievement for all learners. Note the specific objectives. 2.2.8, develop a data tracking system for language acquisition in ASL. And 2.2.9, provide opportunities for students to acquire 2 languages, ASL and English. To this end, we understand that an instructional curriculum to support academic instruction for both ASL and English is vital. There are few published materials for dual language instruction with young, deaf, or hard of hearing students available. We explored the establishment of a comprehensive program to support language acquisition of both ASL and spoken English. The majority of children have complete and natural access to spoken language in their environment. These children are ready to continue their learning at school. The standard ELA curriculum is designed to meet the needs of the learners. The majority of deaf and hard of hearing children come from families that do not sign or sign minimally. They have limited access to language in their environment. These children experience significant gaps in language, vocabulary, incidental knowledge, and social emotional skills. The standard ELA curriculum is inaccessible. Teachers spend planning time to modify or create accessible materials. In 2010 through 2014, a group of ASDB teachers created accessible ASL versions of the ELA curriculum moving into English and integrated dual language instructional strategies. The results were promising. These 5 students received this dual language instruction model from kindergarten through 4th grade. The students varied in regards to primary language used in the home, their loss, and academic readiness. By 3rd and 4th grade, in the year 2013-2014, all 5 students scored either at approaches or meets the standard in the Arizona's Instrument to Measure Standards, AIMS test, assessment reading subtest. The moving into English, accessible materials, and dual language approach demonstrated strong promise. Students examined the parallels in word learning, also known as phonology, between ASL and English. Students examine and compare the phonology of ASL signs, hand shape, location, and movement. Students examine and compare the phonics of English words, first letter, and word families. Guided reading, comprehension skills. Teachers guide students as they interact with ASL and English reading materials simultaneously to develop and strengthen targeted literacy skills. Research demonstrates the many benefits of dual language support for our students. Bilinguals develop metalinguistic awareness earlier. Bilingualism leads to cognitive benefits in multiple areas. Bilinguals have larger vocabularies and stronger grammar and complex language skills. Fluency in ASL supports the development of English. A systematic approach to connecting both languages helps develop literacy skills in both ASL and English. Bilingual children achieve normal language milestones. Bilingual Grammar Curriculum, BGC. The bilingual grammar curriculum is a comprehensive approach to teaching grammar so that students internalize the elements and use them independently to improve expressive ASL and English abilities. Teachers support students' metalinguistic ability to guide them in looking at grammar skills first in ASL and then applying what they have learned to English. The bilingual grammar curriculum uses a developmental approach and is therefore not a grade-level guide. Each lesson begins with the ASL grammar structure. Students demonstrate mastery of the objective in ASL before transferring the concept to English. In closing, we want to convey our profound appreciation, hands waving, to the 75+ staff and signing community members who enthusiastically contributed their time to work with us in the creation of our videotape. Take a look at the diversity of signing styles and signers.
Wow. I have to say that I've watched this video 3 times and I could watch it again. I have Tina and Tricia here if you have any additional questions or comments or just anything. They'd love to hear your feedback.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
This is Linda Bove. Hello. For Tina, I do want to let you know that I went to one of 2 conferences recently myself. I was able to witness what you have to offer. And I met a gentleman who, what was his name? Mr. Oh no, I forgot. Todd, yes, Todd. Todd, who is just amazing, and he explained a lot more about this BGC approach, and I just want to express my profound support for what you are doing. I love the choice of what you're offering, having our students learn ASL first and bridge to English. It makes so much sense. And I've seen a few different videos of our kiddos when they're really little, 2, 3, 4, having that strong language foundation. So thank you, Superintendent Reichman and Dr. Rex, for choosing and implementing that curriculum, and I can foresee this being very successful, and I have a great deal of confidence in all of your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. PV?
This is PV Jantz. I do have a few questions. You are doing formal assessments for English reading comprehension, is that correct? And Tricia's saying, that does depend. We give district and state level testing, if that's what you mean. This is PV. Are you doing ASL formal assessments as well? Tricia's saying, the ASL assessments are still in the works. There isn't anything that is formal and standardized. So within the curriculum, BGC is still fairly new. It's really the only curriculum for ASL that's focused on bilingual instruction. So we do have benchmarks and baseline. So we start in the fall doing an assessment in ASL and English to get a baseline, and then in the spring we're looking at benchmarks, areas of improvement, needs for support, etc. So as far as district or state level, we do not, unfortunately, have standardized tests for ASL soon, but we do hope to find one soon. And Tina's saying, yes, we are in the process of identifying a standardized ASL assessment for the agency. This is PV. How much classroom time is dedicated to instructing in proper English, and how much time is dedicated to ASL instruction? And this is Tricia. So since the summer, the ODD developed those benchmarks, and we are still practicing on how to measure language ability. So for some students, they're able to sign very fluently, and they are ready to start learning English as well, and they're making greater progress. If we have students who are delayed in both languages, we start with ASL first because it is more accessible to them. Once we get them a solid foundation in ASL, we can start bridging to English. If they already have an English foundation, then we'll start bridging to ASL, again, with the goal being that they're fluent in both languages. But we can't forget about that social language. We do talk about formal language and zone of proximal development, but we also need to make sure that students have appropriate social language so that they're able to acquire academic knowledge as well. And Tina's saying, academically, we are very slowly developing our text available, video text specifically. So looking at ASL language, grammar, and culture, Rose and I are the only 2 people who are able to dedicate resources to that. And with so many K through 2nd grade readers, it's really difficult to get all of that into ASL on video. We need to really enumerate the ASL grammar and the English grammar. So if we've got a book talking about the perfect pizza, there's role shifting in that, which is an ASL grammatical feature. And that is something that we are identifying and developing, and it's a lot of work. But again, there are only 2 of us working on that. Ideally, we need more people. If you want to see the general education curriculum in comparison, there are a lot of names contributing to a single text. It's a lot of work. And this is Tricia. I want to add that literacy group that we talked about over the summer, we got some feedback and talked to a lot of the staff, and they feel like they need more training. So they know about BGC, they've had training on it, but they need more, and they need to know how to identify when and where to integrate which of the features of the curriculum, and they need a lot more guidance. So we are working on providing better training over the summer. And Tina's saying, Rose, you're on the phone, right? Did you want to add anything? Or maybe Rose is not on the phone. My mistake.
No.
No, it seems Rose is not on the phone. Okay. And this is PV. Thank you. I really appreciate that additional information. I currently have a child going to PDSD, so I have started asking more questions about the educational approach. And I do agree with what you're saying about emphasizing social skills and social language. That is very important. However, I do have one concern with that social instruction is for those kids that don't have that ASL grammar developed yet, that is, they're going to pass on or carry on those bad habits if they don't know appropriate grammar and if they're not given that formal instruction. So does that instruction also include the 5 parameters of ASL? Tina's saying yes. We start at the kindergarten level with the parameters. And, okay. We have ASL phonology, for example, which we start teaching very young. We have videos that demonstrate and identify the parameters of each sign, what's the hand shape, the location. So they've got a lot of fun activities that they do in those videos to learn ASL phonology. So K and first, they start with hand shape and location, and then as they advance through their instruction, they learn more features. Just like with English, they learn letters first, and then they start learning sight words, so there are a lot of parallels in that. Trisha saying, just a reminder, as far as social language is concerned, about 10% of deaf children are born to parents who can sign. So having that incidental learning, that access to language from birth, is very rare for our deaf kids. So we get a lot of kids who are 3 or maybe 8 or maybe in high school, and they have little to no language sometimes. And that's significantly impacting their cognitive development, and it could cause some shifts in their brain. And so we need to expose them to as much language as possible. They're only in school 20% of the time, and we really need to work hard to pull up that language. Yes, we need that academic instruction and that academic language, but they're going to get a lot more of their language development socially. So we need all of that integrated very quickly, and let them learn what the difference is between social language and formal language so that they have a strong foundation. Okay, thank you. This is PV. Thank you. I appreciate it. And again, partly why I'm asking is about the time dedicated to formal ASL instruction, because there's a lot of formal English instruction that relies on social learning rather than formal instruction. So I'm wondering if there's a plan to expand that or implement additional strategies, so like with the ASL specialist positions or others who are specialized in ASL, dedicating one-on-one time to teaching ASL, practicing those skills, just like, you know, speech therapy or language therapy. And this is Tina. There are not a lot of ASL resources available for instruction. Most of those are what we are developing, and it is a long and slow process, so we are still working on that. Tricia, did you want to add? This is Tricia. I can't really speak for Tucson campus. I can only speak for PDSD. We do have 2 ASL specialists, one who is focused heavily on providing IUP-based services, and the other who is looking at other things like how to support teachers implementing BGC and how to support curriculum and that kind of thing. And really, BGC is a framework. So we can't just download everything ready-made and use it. It is still a project, and we have to develop more materials. So we have one ASL specialist who's doing a lot more push-in and who's working with students in the classroom and trying to get ASL immersion. And so some of those kids that do have that social language, that's great, but we need to clean that up, like the grammar features that you were talking about. So we've got 2 ASL specialists and about 250 students, and that does not add up. Mrs. Peavy, I do agree, and I would like to see expansion of that ASL specialist position, if possible, on both campuses. And I would also strongly encourage the board to support that need to what you have demonstrated to expand your program and evaluation process. This isn't just our kindergartners through 3rd, 4th grade. We really need to see this go into middle school, and any incoming students should have that ASL evaluation to determine what gaps in language they have as far as their ASL, and receive formal instruction to fill in those gaps, and again, compare where they're at with their English as well. And I'm pretty sure that Gallaudet has done research studies, and if we can improve their ASL academic skills, that gap significantly reduces in terms of their use of, if their ASL grammar is improved, then that has a positive impact on their English as well. So again, I want to indicate the importance within deaf education. ASL was recognized a long time ago, back in the mid-60s, and deaf education has been playing catch-up. Gallaudet educational research only started back in the early 90s, and to mid-2000s at least, and so there's just not a lot of time, there hasn't been a lot of time dedicated to that research. So I'd like to encourage you and the board to really provide the additional resources necessary to continue that work for language acquisition, because I do feel that ASL improvement will also apply to our kids learning English and spoken language as well. Mrs. Tina, yes, having good technology to support ASL development in the classroom as well would really help us. Mrs. Tricia, I do appreciate your supportive comments. We absolutely do need support at the agency level, at the board level, to really push this forward for the benefit of our students. We can do it, we just need the right resources. I strongly believe that our teachers and our students are capable. We are deaf adults, and here we are. I believe that we can have more successful folks in the future if we have the right supports in place. Mrs. Peavy, I have one last question, and then I will yield the floor to Linda. Are you talking to Gallaudet Research Center about what resources you can borrow from them or use to evaluate students? Perhaps could help them develop their resources as well, create collaboration. I hope that you're not reinventing the wheel of some things that Gallaudet has already created. It has been just a few months we've been reaching out and partnering with other schools for the deaf. A lot of deaf schools across the country develop resources internally, and we are trying to create a centralized database. So with videos and resources of native signers, and we can exchange what we have for what they have. Gallaudet does have a lot of different articles and a lot of information that we use. We tweak some of it to help us, but we haven't actually reached out to them to talk about research opportunities, but we can definitely do that. And Tina's saying, at the Clerk Center, there are a variety of deaf adults in a committee that is developing resources, and we are doing the same thing. Across the country, everybody is working to make those resources. Trisha's saying, regarding the state, so Gallaudet is at the national level, and then at the state level, there are different standards. There are different curriculum expectations, components of curriculum that is approved or not. So that does vary state to state, and so we can't all completely rely on Gallaudet as our primary source, because they are not necessarily developing curriculum that would meet our state standards. But whatever we develop has to meet our state standards, and as well as our student needs. Thank you. Linda?
Hi, this is Linda speaking. So a little bit about what PV said. He had mentioned the Clare Center, and I do know they have a workshop, they have training, which I have taken in the past. There are 2 or 3 wonderful instructors there, and they're focusing on literacy skills for the younger kiddos and resources for bilingual education, bimodality education. So I'm sure you might know who I'm talking about at Gallaudet, but they have a lot of resources and a lot of videos that I came across, PowerPoints. So there's a lot of different things I think that we can yield here and modify to fit our needs at ASDB. So I would encourage you to take a look. They have 2 or 3 wonderful deaf leaders in that center at the Clare Center for you to look at. And this is Tricia. We have been involved with some monthly meetings, and in that we've seen a lot of great information, and through that we were able to connect with different leaders all over the nation, and we will continue to collaborate with Gallaudet and the Clare Center as well. This is PV. I guess I lied. I am sorry. I do have one final question. Are there any plans, or are there any assessments that we need to add or modify for our deafblind students or those close vision students? I know that CDHL population is continuing to grow, and I want to make sure that they also have this access. This is Tricia. I would agree, we have noticed the same rising numbers, and we do want to make sure that our videos are clear, that our backgrounds are not visually distracting, and so that they are very clear on video. And we're trying to advocate for pro-tactile as well. And this will make sure that these students have an additional accessibility to their surroundings, to what, let's say, facial expressions are on the video that they don't have access to. And that is in addition to the curriculum that we're working on now. And this is Tina. We do, in our deafblind program, have some people that have contacted us and have asked us for resources, and so we do have a relationship there. This is Tricia. And our goal is that all of our students have the appropriate access and no child is left behind. And so we want to make sure that that is met across the board. Mrs. PV, thank you. I definitely would like to connect you with the ACDHH. They have a deafblind specialist within that organization, and I think they're fantastic. But thank you so much again. This is Trish. This is Tina. You are welcome to come. Come to our office at any time. We'll show you around, show you the resources that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? Thank you very much for that presentation. Next up is 3.03 action item, approval of new district agreements. Dr. Rex.
I'm borrowing a packet here, sorry. We have in, for your approval, Region 3, and with Desert Sky Community School, we have one addition at this point in time.
Thank you, Dr. Rex. We have I move that we adopt or move forward or adopt the agreement as proposed.
I second.
All in favor?
Excuse
Aye.
me,
Oh,
excuse me,
sorry.
President
Oh,
Nigro.
sure.
I have a question for a point of clarification.
Sure.
This is PV Jans. Would you mind explaining the history of how that contract was established, please?
The contract with the school district, with the charter school that you
Correct,
reached?
yes. How did that come up? I'm wondering where or how that process started and what their needs are.
I believe that started with Jay Johnson. They reached out to Jay, and they may have acquired a student. A lot of times we acquire school districts throughout the year as students move, so they might have had a need on one side or the other. And so once they find that they have a need and they have to provide accessibility, they reach out, and then we start working on an agreement.
Okay, that's great news. I think that that really demonstrates the shining star that is our itinerant services, that there is that outreach. They're reaching out to us, and the more schools that contract with us and provide our services, I think that's wonderful.
I think it would be good to maybe even put in a report the increase of districts that have come on board in the last couple of years. We are definitely bringing on more districts and larger districts than ever before.
This is PV. I do agree, yes, I would like to see that data. I think that we need to celebrate each of those victories, including contracts like this one. So hopefully we continue to approve these contracts and demonstrate that we have a shining reputation as a school for the deaf that can provide services statewide.
Thank you, PV. We were in the middle of the vote, and I believe, okay.
I'm sorry, should we go ahead and vote? I apologize, Dr. Negro, President Negro, excuse me. Should we vote now, and should I make my comment afterwards? I'm sorry.
You can make the comment now if you like. That's okay.
Okay. I have a question for Dr. Rex about these contracts with school districts. So people in power can, I'm sorry, one moment for the interpreter. Okay, so this is Linda asking a question for you, Dr. Rex. If we have more school districts that sign contracts for us to provide services for their students, as the agency grows or the itinerant services grow, that could potentially be a challenge, I would imagine, as far as staffing is concerned, and ensuring that we have qualified staff to provide those services. Hopefully that's more clear for the interpreters. Thank you.
It is a current challenge. We are always seeking. A lot of times we get last minute notice that districts want to join us, and that's because their recruiting and retention efforts for HI or VI staff have been unsuccessful. The need for interpreters is always changing for our students. The needs are always, and it's very fluid. So yes, we are always in need of highly qualified staff members. And it is a challenge.
Okay.
Okay. We were in the middle. If everyone can say aye again, that's voting yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And aye.
Are there any opposed?
None opposed, but I will abstain.
And you'll abstain. There's one abstention. All right, so that passes. Thank you. And the next up is 4.01 information item finance report. Kim Bittridge, please.
Good afternoon, Board President Nigro.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Ms. Bittridge, we can't hear you.
Good afternoon, Board President Nigro, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex, Assistant Superintendent Cooper, members of the board, and the ASDB community. There it goes. Our most recent Finance Committee meeting was held on last Thursday, April 28th, with board members Aaron Wonders, Mike Gordon, and PV Jantz. Also in attendance were Superintendent Reichman and Assistant Superintendent Cooper. During the meeting, we reviewed and discussed in detail the March 2022 and 2021 budget to actual comparison reports, the available cash balance, student count, student-teacher ratios, full-time equivalents, and the grant revenue and expenditures. The April reports are not available at this time. Just an update on business services. We are actively recruiting for the purchasing supervisor position and assistant controller positions. The budget and grants supervisor position was filled in April, and the budget team is preparing for the year-end closing process and starting the budget process for budget fiscal year 2023. Provided to each of you is the same financial data that was provided to the Financial Committee in a more condensed, summarized version. On page 2, you can see the student count report for April 1st, 2022 compared to April 1st, 2021. The total student count for 2022 is 2,186 students, 24 students fewer than the 2021 count of 2,210. The site-based student count has decreased by 11, while the preschool count has decreased by 16. These are offset by an increase in co-op students of 3 and birth to 3 students of 4. The future reports will include the student count for FBC and Desert Voices. In 2022, we had 49 preschool students at FBC and 3 at Desert Voices. Compared to 2021, there were 59 preschool students and 2 at Desert Voices. For the Birth to 3 program, we currently have 109 students in 2022 compared to 133 students in 2021. This is a reduction of 24 students. As of April 1st, we have 506.79 FTE, which includes 8.5 FTE at FBC. We currently employ 738 staff, however, many of them are part-time. There are currently 105 vacancies across the agency, which includes 30 teachers, 19 instructional assistants, 13 interpreters, 10 bus drivers, and 33 various other positions. Page 4 starts the financial comparison data. The collected revenue for budget fiscal year 2022 is $24.5 million, 11% higher than the budget fiscal year 2021 revenues of $22 million. The primary increase is in federal funds and Prop 301 funds received. However, we are still waiting for reimbursements of $550,000 from the RSA VR grants. The obligated expenditures are $41.5 million for budget fiscal year 2022 compared to $43.5 million in budget fiscal year 2021, a reduction of $2 million. The reductions are in payroll, food, equipment, offset by increases in professional and outside services, travel, and transfers out. The $1.3 million increase in professional and outside services includes contractual agreements as a result of becoming a local education agency for transportation and related services. In addition, there was an increase in the contractual prices for the services maintained at FBC. Page 7 of the report shows the budget to actual expenditures as well as the remaining budget balance by object class, by fund, and by program. We have currently expended 68% of our budget compared to 74% expended at this time in 2022. Page 8 has the actual program expenditures by object class and by fund type. Page 9 has the expenditures by operational area and by object class and by fund. In 2021, the instructional and student support services accounted for 66% of total expenses, while they account for 64% in 2022. The decrease is mostly in the cost of payroll. Overall, the cost for each operational area has remained fairly consistent. However, the expense categories have changed, especially in transportation and food services. On page 10, the chart shows the expenditures by appropriated and non-appropriated funds. You can see the largest expenses in the appropriated funds are in personnel costs, accounting for 76% of the expenditures. The largest expense in the non-appropriated funds is the professional and outside services, which accounts for 42%. Page 12 has the budget status report for all sources. It's important to know that the revenue exceeds the expenditures for budget fiscal year 2022 by $2.5 million, while we were operating at a deficit of $1.3 million in 2021. The budget fiscal year 2022 actual revenues were $41.1 million compared to $39.2 million in 2021. The major differences were $767,000 increase in federal grants revenue, which includes $350,000 in IDA funds, $47,000 increase in Medicaid funds, and $143,000 increase in gifts and donation, which includes the sale of a donated property. $156,000 increase in the land endowment funds, and $1.1 million increase in the Prop 301 funds. Budget fiscal year 2022 actual expenditures and encumbrances were $41.5 million compared to $43.5 million in 2021. The increase in actual expenditures includes $2.6 million in professional and outside services for the food contract, FBC services, transportation and related services, including one-to-one nurses. An increase of $500,000 in other operating resulting from the increase in risk management, the maintenance of the fleet, and the increased cost of fuel. These increases are offset by the reduction of payroll and equipment costs. The comparative balance sheet on page 13 shows a fund balance of $18.9 million compared to $12.5 million in 2021. The increase is mainly due to the cash received from the federal grants reimbursements and Prop 301 classroom site funds. In summary, based on a review of the financial data, there are no immediate material concerns based on what is shown for the remainder of the fiscal year. If there are no questions, this concludes my report on the agency's informational and fiscal business services. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you. Next up, 7.01, information item, introduction and possible discussion policies, GCCH and GCD. Marie Murphy.
Good afternoon, Board President Nigro, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendents Rex and Cooper. You have before you the proposed red line revisions of the two policies. Excuse me. I have a little bit something in my throat here. Of GCCH and GCD. The policies were posted on the website for public comment. No public comment was received. The changes, as you will see, are fairly minor. In terms of the bereavement policy, it's making some minor changes regarding ensuring that there is some kind of proof that is provided of the bereavement, and for out-of-state, it's requiring superintendent approval. And for GCD, excuse me, I have this open and it went away on me. I'm so sorry, it went away on me. I beg your pardon. For GCD, the change is that the superintendent would be required to approve any non-exempt employee working on a holiday. So those are the extent of the changes. I'm sorry for the delay here, technology. At this time, I would like to make myself available for any questions if you have any.
Are there any questions for Ms. Murphy? No? Thank you, Ms. Murphy.
Thank you.
Next is 7.02, discussion and possible action, Ombudsperson position. Next step, Superintendent Reichman.
Yes, this is Superintendent Reichman. On the agenda is the topic of an ombudsperson. We have added the PDQ, or the job description, for an ombudsperson that we developed 3 years ago for that position. The question for the board is, what do you want to do? Last time, the board set up a subcommittee or an ad hoc subcommittee to accept applicants, conduct interviews, and select a candidate that you wanted to become an ombudsperson. If you would like to do that again, you can choose to establish that subcommittee. I do have some thoughts, but I wanted to bring that to you first to see how you would like to proceed.
Can you tell us your thoughts first?
This is Superintendent Reichman. One thought regarding the Ombudsperson is having that person reporting to me as superintendent rather than reporting to the board. That way, I can go ahead and set up the search, conduct interviews, select a candidate, and then set the expectation regarding reporting to me and reporting to the board. That way, I can create some accountability for that position and make sure that the data and information provided to the board is provided to the board on a regular basis. With our previous ombudsperson, she provided a report to the board, I think, one time. We were working with her to try to figure out how to document each of the situations that she handled and how to put that data into a spreadsheet and summarize it in a way that she could report to the board regularly. And that did not happen. So I think if the board does want an ombudsperson, we need to establish accountability for that position. And the way to establish accountability is that person would be directly under me so that I can make sure that that person is doing their work and is also reporting regularly to the board and to me as well.
Thank you.
Linda has her hand up.
Linda?
This is Linda. I have a question for Superintendent Reichman. Over the last couple of years, from your perspective, what do you need? Is there one specific need that you have? Do you need someone on a permanent basis or an as-needed basis? Or what do you have in mind for that position? If you want that person to report directly to you, that's fine. So my question is, what do you need? Based on what you've experienced in the past. This is Superintendent Reichman. Based on what's happened in the past, it was an as-needed situation, as-needed position. The staff, students, or community members could contact the ombudsperson to ask for information, and the ombudsperson would respond to those individuals, provide the requested information regarding what they can do in their situation, their options, and then follow up to see if the issue that person brought forward was resolved. It was on an as-needed basis. And previously, the ombudsperson, I think she did an average of maybe 5 hours a week. There really wasn't a lot of work. It was less than part-time. It really depended on what was happening in that moment with our staff, students, parents, and the community. One thing is that people often misunderstood the role of an ombudsperson. Sometimes people thought if they went to the ombudsperson and let them know that they had a specific issue, then the ombudsperson would go to the board and tell the board, and then the board would resolve the issue for that person, which is not the role or responsibility of an ombudsperson. The ombudsperson's responsibility is to provide information and options and explain that process, explain the policy that we have, explain both the complaint and the grievance policies, provide some feedback on how to have those crucial conversations with supervisors, how to go up the appropriate chain of command when necessary, how to work with HR, whether they're an employee or if it's a parent or a student, what procedures they can take, and essentially how to follow policies and procedures. The Ombudsperson is not an advocate. They are not there to advocate on behalf of staff or the parent in question. They're just there to provide information. So when I hear from the community that they want an Ombudsperson, there is a lot of misunderstanding about what that role is to be and what that person's responsibilities are, and what that person is supposed to be doing. For you as the board, looking at that Ombudsperson, it's for you to have some accountability and some assurance that complaints are being addressed and discussed. That Ombudsperson can provide a summary and data stating that, for example, I have received X number of reports regarding this issue, X number regarding this issue, these were the resolutions, or there was no resolution, so that we have a better pulse on what's going on within the agency. So it's also an opportunity for the board to feel more comfortable responding to complaints from staff, from the community, etc. So you have more information to work with.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions for Superintendent Reichman or other comments? It's okay.
This is Sukay. I think part of that role also needs to be not only hearing the complaints and coming in and helping educate people providing those concerns to the Ombudsman about the process, but I also think there needs to be some oversight to make sure that there aren't gatekeepers along the way that are not allowing the process to actually be actualized. And that's some of what we have heard in some of the complaints previously, is that people feel like they can't go to the person they have the concern about because it doesn't go beyond that. So whether that's happening or not, I think the point of having the ombudsman position would be to monitor that process and make sure that it was effectively being utilized and actualized.
Thank you, Sukay. I think at this point, what we might consider doing is, forming an advisory committee to locate or supervise the location and hiring of the ombudsperson. And when I say supervise the hiring, the advisory committees are advisory only. So any decision or report that they make is not binding on the board. We'd have to all agree, or the board would have to agree by majority vote.
Can you say that one more time?
Sure. The advisory committees are advisory only, and their decisions are not binding on the board. The board would need to vote on a potential candidate, but the advisory committee can confer with the superintendent and locate candidates and interview those candidates and provide a report of those interviews.
This is PV Jans. I'm not sure that's a wise use of our time and the leadership team's skills and capabilities. I would like to see the leadership team propose maybe their top 2 or 3 candidates, and then perhaps the board can select from that top 2 or 3 based on their recommendations.
This is David. For this position, because the ombudsperson works so closely with the board, I mean, to me, it makes sense to have a couple of board members take a look at this more closely. That's my thought. Maybe the whole board doesn't agree. In the last round when we did this, there were 2 candidates, and board members, including myself, interviewed them, and then that was brought to the whole board for a vote. I will say it is 5:30, so we've been an hour and a half, so we should take our 10-minute break right now, and then we can resume with this topic. All right, thank you. Sorry, we are ready to return. It is 5:40. Thank you. So we were discussing the possible action of the ombudsperson position.
This is Linda. I'm sorry, did you want to say something first, President Nigro?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I am wondering, for any of those other folks down the table, if you can tell us what your idea of an ombudsperson would be. I would like to hear a little bit more, some different perspectives on this. We've heard from Annette, and I would like to get some different input. So for me personally, to have a better understanding of others' expectations.
Linda, this is David. We do have an ombudsperson policy that does set out the responsibility and the role of the ombudsperson.
David, can I? This is UK. I'm going by what I know working in DES and having an ombudsperson specifically for voc rehab. The overarching goal is to make sure that there is neutrality in the process and that people have access to the process, and that they understand what options are available to them. In my mind, it could function as, because the position is in policy, it could function as part of the HR team, but maybe not report to the HR supervisor. Maybe report, like Annette had mentioned, maybe report directly to Annette. And then again, I think it is to make sure there is, for lack of a better word, veracity in oversight of the process, to make sure that people feel that their concerns are being heard, that they understand the options available to them under policy, whether it's a complaint or a grievance, and that it is being seen to conclusion. I think where we were hearing concerns is that people felt like, and again, whether we have verification of that or not is not the issue at this point. The point is people are feeling like they bring up their concern and it ends right there. So there needs to be that follow-up and closure loop to make sure that they understand what has happened with their complaint and what the result was of that complaint process.
This is Lynn. I agree with Suke. I've heard similar situations where staff didn't feel that they were being heard or it wasn't being followed through. So this would be a neutral person that can help guide them through the process and who they can talk to. I think the staff feels that they really need that, and I would support that.
And this is Suke again. I agree. I don't, based on the use that we had previously, I don't know that it needs to be more than a part-time person. But I do think there are other opportunities within the role, from a staff education, even a community parent education piece, to make sure that people are clear on the policy and the policy is accessible to everybody. So I do think there are things that could make it go from maybe 5 hours to a, I don't know, 10, 15, 20-hour position. But I do think that accountability piece should come from the superintendent.
This is David. And further to Suke's point, the ombudsperson isn't, the historic usage of the ombudsperson was very low. Over the 3 years that we had The former ombudsperson, we spent about $7,000 a year on that person's work. So it was, it ebbed and flowed. Some months she didn't do any work because there was nothing. Others she did more. But on a year-to-year basis, it was, very, very minimal. It's, much less than part-time.
And this is Aaron. I would just echo from my perspective what Suke was saying in terms of kind of the role and responsibility of an ombudsperson in state government. And I think even looking at the position description as well, I think there's also value and benefit in understanding if there are systematic deficiencies that are a result of the way that the policy has either been implemented or drafted for the board to understand and potentially look at those policies.
And PV? Or Linda first? Okay, this is Linda. And I want to follow up on an additional question. You mentioned the policy. If I recall correctly, 3 years ago, we did look at the policies for a grievance process and a complaint process, which are already in the handbook for staff. And is that sufficient or not? And that's something that I don't fully understand. And admittedly, I haven't heard any complaints, while some of the rest of you seem to have heard some complaints that I haven't heard from staff who have had those kinds of concerns. And so it seems perhaps there are two different groups of us, some of us, maybe just me. I'm not going to lump PV in with me, but I wasn't aware of these, people haven't been coming to me with that. So I think, figuring out a way to balance that complaint process would be a good thing.
Sure. This is David. About 5 years ago, maybe it was 6, I'm not exactly certain, I'd have to go back and check. We undertook a revision of the complaint and grievance process. There were 7 or 8 different processes depending on who you were and what the substance of the issue was, and people were a little confused about which to use. And what we did is we simplified those. So we just have, I believe, 4 of them now, depending on if you're a parent or student, a staff member, or a member of the public. And I think the staff one has kind of 2 subparts. One relates to certain issues of employment, and others relate to other issues of employment. That's the difference between a complaint and a grievance. And those are different processes. So we simplified that, and we added the ombudsperson to kind of hear complaints or hear issues that they didn't really know where to go, if that makes sense. They didn't know how to proceed with something, and the ombudsperson would help them through that process. And it could be filing a complaint, it could be filing a grievance, it could be resolving something more informally, it could be something that someone just misunderstood. But the ombudsperson then reported that to us on a regular basis, and we were able to see, what the ombudsperson was dealing with. So as an example, one of the northern offices was moved from Flagstaff to Sedona a few years ago, and the ombudsperson fielded, I think, 21 complaints. If I'm remembering offhand, it might be more or less than that, but it was a lot. And we were able to see that, there were some reasons for that. Now we talked with the staff, and the staff had reasons and the leadership had reasons as to why that move was made. But again, it was an issue that came up and that we knew about. And I don't think that we necessarily would know about it otherwise. And if there's not really a good mechanism for us to understand that. Good. Suke.
This is Suke again. I think something else to take a look at in looking at hiring an ombudsman position is, even with the processes in place, there are different ways to approach a resolution, and it could be facilitating a conversation between the person who has the complaint and the person who made a decision that they are complaining about. It could be more like a mediation sort of perspective. It could also be elevating something, in my mind, to a higher decision authority for review if it warrants it. So I do think there are opportunities to utilize them in some strategic ways to handle and look at resolution to these complaints, and then be able to report back not only to the superintendent, but then provide some of that data on a monthly basis to the board as far as how those complaints or grievances were categorized by number, and then the different steps or how many went to mediation, how many went to a higher authority for review and maybe overturning a decision. So being able to sort of track that data longitudinally to see how, if having a person in place actually has caused some of those things to resolve at the lowest level, and maybe see a reduction in the number of complaints.
This is PV. I've been thinking on this for a while and listening to folks' comments. And it makes me wonder, I do understand the prior history. When we did have an ombudsperson, that person was only utilized maybe 5 hours a week. And if we had an ombudsperson reporting directly to the superintendent, and they were held accountable and held to a standard or an expectation that was indeed neutral, I imagine that we could probably see the superintendent and her leadership team make that position a full 40-hour position, which would mean that person could technically take a more active role within the agency, become more directly involved, and make it well known that that person is present, and make them recognized and make staff aware of who they are. I think one thing that did come up in our previous conversation was the fact that people took a training for a complaint and grievance process, but they said they didn't know how to actually file a complaint or a grievance. So obviously that training is not effective. And that's something that an ombudsperson could take responsibility for, to look into and modify, make sure that that's being addressed. Maybe there needs to be a test, something to demonstrate that people understand, and that ombudsperson's role would be to approach the superintendent from a neutral perspective, and then the superintendent can bring it to the board. And that would be a good way to see that position become full-time, fully utilized, in order to maintain and really push forward our strategic plan that we've been working on for the agency.
This is Suke again. Just as an idea or a suggestion in expanding this role, this could be somebody that also works at again, I think it could be part of an HR team, but reporting directly to the superintendent, looking at overall agency, not just the campuses, but the co-ops as well, from a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility standpoint as well. So not only handling some of those internal grievances, but then making sure that the agency as a whole are meeting those requirements from a legal standpoint under 504, ADA, if sports are involved, Title IX, those types of things as well.
Yes, this is PV. Exactly what my thoughts are. I could see that really expanding pretty quickly, and not just for internal use, but also more for parents if they have a grievance or a disagreement with the IEP or services that are being provided. That ombudsperson can be involved as a neutral person to help them figure out the appropriate approach or appropriate avenue, and bring that to the superintendent for awareness, bring it to the board if necessary, look at contract disagreements, figure out a neutral way to have those kinds of conversations. If something can't be resolved with the contract department, then again, having that neutral perspective, I can see that really easily broadening very quickly. If we have an active person taking an active role within the agency, I can see that developing very fast.
Thank you. So, from here, I mean, it seems that, having an ombudsperson it doesn't seem that anyone doesn't want to do that. So the next item would be, or the next idea would be to form that advisory committee with just 1 or 2 members on it to interview candidates that we find for the position.
Mrs. PV. I mentioned previously that I disagree with that approach only because since I've been on the board, we have had this conversation 2 or 3 times and we still were not able to provide a solution or figure out how to fill that position. And we as a board have faced some challenges in filling that position previously. I think that the superintendent's recommendation is reasonable. If we need to provide a compromise, I'm fine with that. But I would like to make the motion that the superintendent have the authority to select an ombudsperson through an interview process and fill that position. I think it is important that the position be filled prior to the new school year starting.
Is it open for discussion, the motion?
Yeah, no, it hasn't been seconded. It's
Okay.
open for discussion.
The only thing I would like to see maybe added, so I'm going to step back. What I think I would like to see happen is maybe to see the PDQ expanded a little bit to include maybe some other potential accountability standards that could be expected in the position, how the position could potentially grow. I don't have a problem having Annette and the leadership team select a candidate, but I do think it would be good maybe to define the role a little bit more extensively, like how it will be housed, within the agency, who the direct report is to, what some of the accountability standards other than just taking in complaints would be. I think some of that could be fleshed out a little bit more.
Mrs. PV? Are you saying that you want to see that expansion of the PDQ before the candidate selection process begins? So the reason I ask is because the next board meeting is a ways out. And so that means we would really be pushing it into the new school year starting. If we voted on that recommendation, which I do agree with, but if we were to wait and vote at that time, then they couldn't start the formal search until really after the school year had already started. We're into the fall. And by that time, I'm wondering if perhaps we could do those at the same time, meaning the leadership team makes a candidate selection and revises the PDQ, outlines their responsibilities and accountability process, and bring that to the board for the July meeting. We could have a conversation of both and modify as needed.
This is Suke. I don't think the PDQ would need to be approved by the board. I think that could be done internally. So I do think that could be happening at the same time.
This is Lynn. I would think we'd need a complete job description and know what all the duties and responsibilities are of that if we were to add and change before we start looking for somebody, so we can tell them what this job is that we're asking them to do.
This is Linda. Yes, I would feel better about that as well, Lynn, if we had a very specific understanding of the roles and responsibilities of that position and knew what to expect. I would prefer to do that first, see that first, to make sure we have something clear before we go through with that process. And this is PV. Technically, I believe we already have a PDQ from the previous ombudsperson. Is that correct? Superintendent Reichman, can you confirm that?
That's,
And Superintendent Reichman is saying, yes, we do have a PDQ. That is correct. And it is attached to your agenda, as a matter of fact. This is PV. So that being said, I think that they could make the modifications to the existing PDQ as needed. We can review that, make sure we agree with it, but at the same time, they should be able to start moving forward and at least select a candidate. And I don't mind if, for example, they give us their top 2 or 3 and bring those to the board. I would be fine with that. If Superintendent Reichman makes the selection herself, I would be fine with that as well. But I do think that we need to get moving on this.
This is Aaron. I think it's going to be a little bit challenging to go out and try to recruit candidates when the position head description hasn't been fully scoped out to whether it's a 40-hour-a-week type of position or continuing as is as more of a 5-hour as needed. So I think it's hard to go out and recruit without having that more concretely defined. If there is a desire to expand the role into other areas, that seems to me like it would need to be more fully scoped out first.
This is PV. Okay, so maybe I'm not explaining myself clearly, and I apologize. Allow me to rephrase. We already have a PDQ. We already have a position description. So we could tell the superintendent to please go ahead and modify that as you see fit for a full-time position that would be reporting directly to the superintendent. So, for example, that could include Sukei's discussion about being part of the HR team but still reporting directly to the superintendent. So it would include the responsibilities of reporting and get going with that job search or that candidate search. And by the next meeting, she can bring us that modified position description as well as a candidate. And we still technically have to review and approve their contract. So we can do a 1-year contract, take a look at how that goes, and we can essentially reserve the right to modify the PDQ as necessary. So if they make a recommendation for a candidate and we want to add something to the PDQ that that person does not want, if after we've modified the PDQ, then they have every right to not take the position, and we can go to the second or third choice. So I think if we are given the opportunity to kind of make a trial run of that, modify it as we go, my only caution would be that we continue to bring up this topic and we haven't made any progress on it. So I would like to see if we're actually committed, let's make this happen now.
this is Sukei, and while I don't disagree with the need to move this forward, PV, I do want to ask Annette and possibly other members on the leadership team, if they change the PDQ, I know for us at DES, we have to take it all the way up to ADOA for PDQ approval. Okay, so you don't have to do that. Then I would agree with PV. We could make those changes, but I think what we need to decide is, are you looking for an as-needed position? Because I think that's going to be challenging to find. If you can't offer somebody at least a part-time 20-hour or more, with the potential of it growing into something larger, I think we're going to be in the same place in the July board meeting and the board meeting after that, because that as-needed type of position for a specialty group like ASDB, I think is going to be very challenging to find the right fit. And so I think you need to, in my humble opinion, I would support a amendment to PV's motion, thank you for that word, to include some parameters of it being at least a 20-hour-a-week position with the potential of growing to something more if other duties were found to be able to be added into that role. I think it will be far easier to recruit and find somebody that will have a commitment to the agency if it's at least those 20 hours a week.
This is Superintendent Reichman. First, I would recommend that if you want more hours on a weekly basis, that either we do a 19-hour-a-week position with no benefits, not do 20 hours a week because that would be required to include benefits, and it's very expensive for the agency to provide benefits to a part-time staff. So I would suggest either 19.5 hours a week with no benefits or a full-time 40-hour-a-week position with benefits.
And this is Suke. I could support either of those decisions if you felt like you had enough that you could expand the role to a 40-hour. Great, but otherwise I could support a 19-hour with no benefits. But I don't think it could be less than that at this point if we want to get somebody who's going to be as committed to us as we want them to be.
This is Superintendent Reichman. My challenge is that I am telling the leadership team that we have to become more responsible for our staff. And sometimes we're overstaffed, sometimes we're understaffed, and we are doing a staff analysis currently, trying to determine how to right-size our number of staff to meet the needs, so based on what we need and what we have within the agency. So I have already asked the leadership team to make some changes. And so now you're asking me to add a full-time position and figure out what kind of work to provide that individual. I can do that, but that means I am taking a different approach than what I have asked my leadership team to take.
And Superintendent Reichman, I certainly agree that this role isn't really envisioned to be even a part-time position. We already have very high administration costs, as we've discussed several times, and I just don't think it's warranted for this position to be a full-time position, or likely even a part-time, based on the volume that we saw with the prior ombudsperson. And just a little bit of history, as everyone will recall, in July, actually last spring, we did an RFP process to find a vendor to be an ombudsperson. We got one reply. The board in July voted to proceed with that person. That person never entered into the contract that they said that they would. So we were left without anyone. So the idea here is that we're going to try to continue our efforts to find someone in some capacity to do this work. I understand that it's harder to get someone on a less than part-time basis, but this is the idea of having a vendor, is that it would be a little bit easier to do that, because with a contractor you can just give a few hours a month or none, depending on the volume. But that didn't work out a year ago.
This is PV. 2 points I'd like to make. One is my motion hasn't been seconded, so it is open for amendments or discussion, of course. And my second point is Superintendent Reichman, you did make a good point regarding your leadership team. And what would you propose instead? This is Superintendent Reichman. I would say part-time up to 19 hours a week with no benefits, with some flexibility in their schedule and their hours when they actually work. And we would provide a phone, we would provide an email address, a laptop, and we would pay for travel as needed, meals, etc., per state policy, and other supports that we offer to our other staff, and an office space as well. And this is PV. Do you envision that position being remote or required to be in person? This is Superintendent Reichman. It could be both based on the need. Because we are a statewide agency, I would say both. I think that person would serve in both roles. They would have in-person meetings and also remote meetings. And this is PB. At 19 hours with no benefits, do you think you would be able to recruit and find someone compared to our previous situation when we did not have success getting that person to sign a contract? This is Superintendent Reichman. That previous person was contracted, not staff. So with a contract position, we did not get any interest. What we're talking about now is a part-time staff position, an actual member of our staff, an ASDB employee. Previously, the Ombudsperson was an employee, not a contractor. That previous person was on our payroll. So I would propose that this be an employee on our payroll who is reporting directly to me. And I would approve their time and their schedule. And this is PV. So to clarify, does that mean you think you can successfully recruit someone as a part-time employee for the position? Superintendent Reichman said, yes, I think so.
Okay, are there, so PV, can you restate your motion?
Oh gosh, I would actually like to modify the motion if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay. So I would like to make a motion that the board gives Superintendent Reichman the authority to begin the recruiting process for selecting a part-time up to 19-hour-a-week ombudsperson position and make a selection.
This is Sukay. I second that.
Okay, and any discussion on that before we vote?
This is PV. I apologize. I forgot one detail that I would like to amend the motion. I would like to amend the motion to say that that position would report directly to Superintendent Reichman.
Okay.
Did I say that already? Oh, I said that already. Okay.
I second that with the amendment.
Okay. Any discussion before we vote? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Next is 7.03, discussion possible action item, mechanism for receiving public comments. So this is an item, I just wanted to take some board discussion on this. You know, in the last couple of years, well, pre-March 2020, we'd have board meetings, they'd be open to the, physically open to the public, they'd be broadcast too on the internet. And people would come, and if they wanted to make public comments, they filled out a form. There were 2 calls to the public. They'd fill out a form for which one they want to do, or both. They'd come and they'd stand up and they'd give 3 minutes of, they'd have each be allotted 3 minutes of time. And we did that for, you know, many years. The COVID happened. We went to Zoom for a little while. We used the email format. That's had several modifications over time as we've kind of refined the process a bit. We still did that today, last meeting, because the meeting has been closed physically closed to the public. Starting in July, it seems that we're going to be opening, you know, back up to the public. So it'll be the meetings will be completely as they were prior to March 2020. I think the opening to the public physically is the last, you know, vestige of of COVID that we're getting rid of. So we, I just wanted to take some discussion as to what the board thought. Should we go back to our previous previous practice, which is if you would like to make a public comment, you come to the meeting, you fill out a form, and then you come to the podium at the designated time. We could not do that at all and retain our email in policy like we have now, where everything gets made of record on the website, and we briefly summarize them, for the meeting. I think that, that kind of shortens the meeting and allows us to get more time to talk together, because these meetings are the only time that we get to come together and talk about these issues. Or we could do something else entirely, but I wanted to, in terms of the public comment, usually that's just something that I have the ability to change, but the policy gives me discretion to do that, but I want to get everyone's thoughts on that before we make a decision.
This is UK. I'm thinking a hybrid. I think if we could take email comments and provide a summary like we've been doing the last couple of meetings, including the name of the person submitting the comments, because I do think we need to be cognizant of not taking anonymous comments. I think we need to follow that a little bit more strictly. And then maybe allot an amount of time for public comments in each of those areas, take them in, and anything that we that we run out of time for after the 3 minutes each, say we cap it at 5 people per section, something to that effect, that the rest of them would then also be put onto the board webpage for people to then go back and read. And we could even tally and say we have 10 comments related to agenda item, 7.2 on this topic. And the first 3 people that submitted their comments are going to be allowed 3 minutes apiece, and the rest of the comments will be placed on the website. That's my thought.
Okay, so what you're suggesting is the people that show up physically, we'd set a limit of, let's say, the first 5, and then if there's overflow, we would take a video of them and post those comments.
Yep.
Okay, and they would do that offline, or we wouldn't do that at the meeting, or we do it at the meeting, but
Correct.
but not not during the set meeting time.
Correct.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
This is Brittany Buchanan. I just want to clarify, Suke, if we're doing a hybrid, which I am fully in supportive, especially since, we don't know what's, at this point, anything could go. If you have like 5 email comments and 5 people in person showing up to comment on the same agendized item, and you want to set a time limit or a person minute, how are we going to differentiate or give, kind of an equal opportunity to people that choose not to come in person and people that do choose to come in person?
This is UK. This is my very humble opinion. I think that the priority should be given to the people who attend in person as far as time in front of the board, because they have made the effort to be here. Again, this is my very humble opinion. And those that provide an email comment, I don't think that it should be ignored or, lower in priority, but I do think we should give the actual time that we have on the agenda to the people that actually showed up. And then just, again, like we have been doing, summarizing the email comments and then making sure that they're posted.
I appreciate your opinion on that. Thank you.
Mrs. PV. I agree with the hybrid approach. I think it's important to offer the opportunity for in-person or an electronic option, or people can record a video and post and share that if they would like. My only concern is with limiting the number of people. Part of our job as the board is to be open to the public and open to their comments and their input. If we limit the number of people who are allowed to comment, that could create the potential sense of unfairness or selective or favoritism, as it were, which is not our intention, of course. So a big challenge that we face as a board and as an agency statewide is that Arizona is a very diverse state, and it's not just regarding gender, culture, race, ethnicity, etc., but it's also geography and access. So perhaps we can do a trial for the next board meeting and see how that hybrid approach works. And then if it's too much, if it's taking too long, there are too many people, we can modify that as needed. But I just don't want to create the sense that we are limiting our public comment where other boards generally don't do that. We do limit the time that they're allowed to comment if they show up in person, but they still have the opportunity to be heard.
This is Suke, and I'm hearing you very loud and clear, PV. One of the things that I have chatted with Annette about in some previous interactions is that we might want to put some of the thoughts for these unagendized comments and maybe provide a couple of opportunities a year for more of a town hall kind of a session for people to have the opportunity to interact with Annette and or members of the board regarding things that are of concern to them that might not be on the agenda. And maybe that would help sort of level that playing field.
Mrs. PV, I like that idea. I do think it's important perhaps that we create a town hall meeting that is open to the public. I think that would be an important step and a good way to address that concern. I think for those non-agendized items, those comments could still be collected or potentially with the ombudsperson. If it's something that looks like a complaint, we could follow up and say, if this is in fact a complaint, bring this to the ombudsperson. The ombudsperson can take it from there. Another option is to make sure that we are prioritizing comments on agendized items. And once those are done, if we have time at the end of the meeting, then we can open it for non-agendized item comments, perhaps.
Are there other comments on that? I mean, Mike, was that? No. Okay. For me, having been to the pre-COVID meetings for quite a number of years, we typically never limited the number of people who can speak, but that never really became an issue. We very rarely, on one occasion that I recall, did we have more than 6 or 7 people speak at 3 minutes a person, and then you're at if there's 7 people or let's say there are 5 people, it's about 15 minutes, and people have to get up and down. One of the things I want to make sure that we're doing is we're hearing everyone, and we can hear everyone a number of ways. One, we have an email address, right? So people can always email us anytime. 2, if they want to make their comment public and put it in a public record, they can send that to the email, and that'll go on the website. And that, I think, is a good thing. We didn't have that before. We didn't even have that before a few meetings ago. So that's certainly a good thing. In terms of limiting the time, if we were to say the first 7 people, and again, a first come first served basis, it wouldn't we're completely viewpoint neutral in that regard. And we limit that number of times. So even with 7 people, we're tacking on about an hour to the meeting. For me, I want to be cognizant of that because we want to be able to have as much of the meeting as we can to have discussion about things that are important to the agency. It's important to hear public comment, but it doesn't necessarily have to be during the meeting to extend the meeting an hour or more. So even if we were to limit it to 7 people, let's say the first 7 people on each of those, so it'd be 14 total, about an hour total of comments at the most. I don't know that we would really on a regular basis ever hit that. Again, there was one exceptional circumstance where there were many more comments in person, and I really hope that doesn't happen again. But again, it was an exception, rather than a rule.
Mrs. Peavy, I do get what you're saying, President Nigro, and I agree. The reason I'm suggesting perhaps a trial or a town hall format, I'm suggesting perhaps a town hall format. Has that been done by the board before?
There was
Saying yes.
one town hall for a very specific purpose several years ago.
Yes, one time.
But again, it was a very specific purpose, and there was a fair number of attendance, I think, from the members of the public and community. But we haven't done it on a regular basis. The only thing I think we've done that is anything even close to that is the interviews for superintendent. When we did that over 6-7 years ago, when we were doing the superintendent search, we held town halls in Phoenix and in Tucson where the superintendent candidates spoke and then took questions from the audience. So again, we did that. That's been a number of years ago at this point. And we had the one town hall about 3 years ago, I think, on a very specific issue.
This is Sukay. I know that Annette has met with stakeholders in the community in that sort of smaller format. And I am just suggesting that maybe the board be open to participating in some of those stakeholder meetings, whether it's the full board or a representation of the board that then could bring back some of those concerns and comments to maybe be added to an agenda for a board meeting. I think it would allow people's voices to be heard, especially with some of the non-agenda items, that maybe we could collect more information. And then, like PV said, again, if it's something that we're suspecting is a complaint, is that something that the ombudsman role could vet out prior to bringing it to the board's attention? I don't know. Just sort of spitballing some ideas here.
That's a great point, Sukay. Superintendent Recruitment does do more and has done more of the town hall type events, and I think it would be good if the board, could participate in those in the future. We'd have to give proper notice if more than a certain number of board members attended, but that's not a problem. We just need to know in advance.
This is PV and also Linda. Okay, I'll yield to Linda. This is Linda. I do support that idea of having a town hall on occasion. I think we have talked about that before, but allowing the public to share their opinion, allowing the board to take that in, and giving us time to think through how we can make supportive decisions, how we can be supportive of the superintendent, get a pulse on the community. I think that's very important. For me as a deaf person on the board, I do feel like I need to hear from the community more, because COVID has created this barrier where we haven't had the opportunity to really interact with public who are concerned about our board's decisions. So I like to have those people in front of us and create a friendly, accessible environment to the board. So yeah, I support that idea. I would think maybe twice a year would be great. And yeah, so just to support what everyone has said so far.
Thank you. All right, if there are no...
This is PVP.
Go ahead.
Sorry, President Nigro. I just wanted to say that I am more than happy to participate in Superintendent Reichman's stakeholder meetings if that would be beneficial to the board. I love that kind of thing, so I'm happy to be involved.
Oh, thank you. No, that would be great. Superintendent Reichman, if you could make sure the board knows about those upcoming events. And the only thing I'd ask is you'd have the board RSVP at least a week in advance, so that if more than 5 want to go, that we properly notice it.
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no other comments, we can move on to 8.01, call the public for non-agendized items. Sukay.
We had 3 emails on a similar topic from Alexa Sloan, Samantha Moore, and Leslie Jandedecker. All 3 indicated support for hiring vacancies in campus leadership with those who are ASL proficient and/or who have background in deaf and hard of hearing education. And then an additional comment from one was in regards to considering looking at not utilizing academic time for speech training and speech therapy, but to have that be as an outside or extracurricular activity.
Thank you, Suke. Next on the agenda, 8.02, discussion and possible action item, agenda items for the next regular board meeting scheduled on July 7, 2022 in Tucson, and possible future work sessions. I can just start by saying that a significant agenda item on that meeting is going to be our review of the first year of the strategic plan. So May of 2021 was the meeting where we approved our strategic plan. So it's almost the 1-year anniversary of that, or it is to the month. So that means that we've had 1 year to collect all of our data and to put it into a format that the board can review it and discuss it. I know we've seen some kind of beta versions of an online tool dashboard to see it that would be open to the public. I don't know if that's going to be ready for July. I hope that it is. I really would like for it to be ready for July, but if not, a PDF report would be sufficient. But the important thing is that all of the data in the strategic plan is compiled and put into a report for us to review, and then we can talk about what this means. What are we seeing that we like? What are we seeing where there might be opportunities for improvement or changes? I think it's going to be good to see that first full year so that we can start to plan for the next year and see what we're going to do to either keep going with the successes that we've had or make some changes to see if we can move some of that data for the next year. So that, I think, is going to be a significant part of that meeting. Are there any other ideas for other action or other agenda items for the next meeting?
This is Superintendent Reichman.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to propose that the board consider a further work study session, perhaps focused on the master facilities plan and that process. The recent work study session, Assistant Superintendent Cooper did talk about that a little bit. But we know that our sunset audit will include a focus on that topic. And so we would like to have the opportunity to have a deeper discussion with the board in the future, perhaps in the summer or fall, to have you start considering what this means and how that would fit in with our strategic plan.
And Superintendent Reichman, I completely agree. And our facilities are, they've been an area of focus for us for a while, and I think even more attention needs to be brought to that. Now, I don't know when that report is going to be done. I know that it has to be done by October. I don't know when we're going to get any kind of initial draft, or maybe it'll be done before that. I'm not sure. We probably want to wait. We would probably want to schedule that for after October. I heard myself a little bit. For after October, so that we have an idea of what the audit says. I wouldn't want to have that work study session before we know what the auditors think. So that would be my suggestion, is that although it is an important issue, that I'd love to have that meeting, in the summer if we could. I just think it doesn't make sense to do it and get some sort of a direction on it before we know what the auditor is going to say.
This is PV. And I do understand that perspective, President Nigro. I sort of agree. At the same time, I do feel that this is going to be a very complex issue that we are going to be facing and with significant challenge. And so we're going to need to look at this almost like the elephant in the room, trying to figure out how we can eat the elephant one bite at a time. So it's going to take a while, which means that we may need to at least start the conversation prior to the results of the sunset audit. And I think if we as a board and the leadership team could perhaps develop some kind of an overall needs assessment or a prioritization of what we feel the agency needs and what we want to commit to, that would help us, help guide us through that conversation after we get the results of the sunset audit. And so I think that we are going to need to have some very tough conversations, and I think starting that earlier than later would be a benefit to us as well as the community.
Are there any other comments on that? Okay. Are there any other suggestions for other work study session topics?
A master facilities plan, or at least getting a review of what all our assets are for the agency.
This is David. We certainly need a strategic facilities plan. In particular, we don't have that, and I know that we need one. I still believe that it would be better to wait for the result of the auditor's general report so that we know what they think are the larger issues that we need to address. That said, you're right that there's nothing to stop us from thinking about it now. And that topic isn't going to be fixed in one work study session. It's going to take a while to resolve.
This is Suke. Just personally, from my perspective, I would like to have sort of a 30,000-foot view at this point, because I know there is a lot involved in that, and I know just that much of it. And so I think even if we could start with the larger picture overview before we, roll up our sleeves and dig down into the details after the audit results, that would be helpful for me as a board member.
Yeah, that I think we can do. When do you want to do that?
I'm flexible. If we need to do that in a work study session before October, we could have Letitia send out a doodle poll for possible dates. I'm open.
I think that's maybe the best. But you would want it in the summer. You'd want it sometime August or before.
Yeah, I would say maybe sometime around August would be good.
Okay.
I don't want to get it too close to what I know that school starts like the third week of July-ish. So I don't want to cram too much into leadership team's plate that close to the beginning of the school year. But if we could have it somewhat close after that, that might be a good way to start diving in.
Okay.
This is PV. I would have to agree with that timeline, particularly because we have to remember they have to fill the assistant superintendent position, conduct that search, of course, and they're also working on filling that principal position for both schools in the Tucson campus, and also we're talking about the ombuds position as well. So they've got a lot of responsibilities before we get to that point.
All right, why don't we do that? Letitia, if you can do a doodle poll for dates that would work for you guys, and then you can maybe give us 3 or 4 options. Are there any other potential topics, either for the next board meeting agenda items or work study sessions? We can always revisit this in July. We don't need to plan all of the next half of the year right now. No? Okay, then we can move on to 9.01. adjournment.
This is Lynn. I move that we adjourn this board meeting.
I second. This is Linda.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, yeah, we have one opposed.
Just kidding.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you to our staff, the interpreters, the media production team. We'll see you at the next meeting.